There's a reason why your bass lines don't hit like the ones in your favorite tracks. And it's not because your ideas are bad, it's because no one showed you a real system. A system to go from a blank MIDI clip to a bass line that shakes the dance floor and makes people move. I've spent 10 years writing bass lines that sounded flat, lifeless, and muddy. And when it finally clicked, my bass lines started hitting like the ones from top producers. Every single time. So in this video, I'm sharing an A to Z masterclass to writing professional bass lines. Let me show you a few examples and let's get started with the video. These are just a few examples we will be going through in this video, and you can also download this project with all the samples and the presets for educational purposes if you want to play with the same bass lines I used in the video. And if you are a music producer or a DJ who is serious about building a real career, you want to get signed, you want to get gigs, get your music played and supported by other DJs, grow your fan base, check out the first link in the description. I have a coaching program that will help you with that. With that said, let's get started with the video. Your key is the emotional foundation of your track. A minor and C minor will sound more dark compared to a major, and major keys often will sound more happy and uplifting. So choose your key wisely depending on the vibe you want to create for your track. For example, most club tracks are written in minor. Imagine each key as a character. C minor wears black leather and smokes in alleyways. G minor is that quiet poet in a blue turtleneck. A major, that guy shows up in white linen like he owns a yacht. The key sets the tone before you even say a word. So think of your key as choosing a mood and character for your track. Alright, let's start with the key of the track, which is one of the most common mistakes that a lot of music producers are making. And the problem is that you're not selecting the key consciously, you're just randomly picking the notes and sticking to it. So let me show you a few examples of different keys and break it down for you so you can then pick the right key for your track every time you produce. So let's go to A and start with that. And then I'll break it down. So you can hear A is pretty high in the register compared to C, for example. Let's now listen to C, and you want to feel the difference. In this example, I would probably not go with C for this specific bass line because it sounds a little bit too low and it doesn't really have enough of that power. And now let's compare to G. And G is somewhere in the middle of the whole scale. So compared to A and to C, G sounds overall like very well-rounded. It's just somewhere in the middle. So here is my tip for picking the right key for your track. So all you have to do is just test different keys until you find the one that sounds best with your kick, with your drums, and with the instruments that you have in the track. So for example, if we go and we try and pick, let's say we're gonna pick F. So F, I think, is overall in the middle of the scale. Maybe like F sharp is exactly in the middle. So check it out. And I think this one sounds very good. And now let's talk about minor and major. Honestly, I never write my tracks in major. All the tracks that I write, they are all in minor, but it's worth mentioning because it will really affect the mood of the track. So generally speaking, roughly speaking, minor is a little bit more sad, major is a little bit more like happy and uplifted. So we can take now A and play it in major. So very different compared to A minor. So now you just have to pick which vibe and what mood you want to go with. Let's talk about one more fundamental mistake that most music producers are making. This mistake is a silent bass line killer. Okay, let's talk about the next thing, and it is picking the right preset. And then again, this is unfortunately a very common mistake that I see a lot of music producers are making. So we're gonna take exactly the same melody, but test it with 3 different presets. 2 of them are good, and 1 is bad. So to illustrate to you this example and the concept. So let's play this one, and this one is a square, pretty close to the original bass line, by the way. Not bad, I think it sounds pretty okay with this melody. And still, the same problem we have with this preset and with C minor as well. It's just a little bit too low. Now with G. Not bad, right? And I want to show you one more example. Different bass line, different sound design, different style, but it's pretty cool. So check out with A. Very plucky, very punchy, works well with the melody. And now check out C. So in this example, you can hear that the same melody in the same key actually sounds really good with this particular preset. So this is the importance of picking the right preset for your bass line. And one last example is going to be a bad example, which is this. So it just sounds super weak. It doesn't really reflect the melody. It's not powerful. It has no impact. So it's either that you have to change your preset or fine tune the preset that you are using to make sure that it fits, because otherwise your bass line just not gonna sound very good. Okay, sound locked. Let's now program the rhythm that makes a hit track. Start with rhythm before the melody. Use just your root note and lock it in with the groove of your drums and instruments. This is going to be your foundation. Think of your track like constructing a building. Groove is the steel skeleton. It holds everything up. And melody, that's the glass, the paint, the fancy entrance. You don't start with window frames and pray they float. You build the structure first. Let's talk about the next concept and the next tip, building the rhythm of the bass line before the melody. So I have an empty MIDI clip and we're gonna create a bass line melody using the rhythm first, and then you're gonna see how easy it actually is to make bass lines this way. So we have the kick and we have the drums. And let's just improvise and come up with a cool melody. Okay, let's say we gonna use this. Although it's pretty simple, it gives us a great foundation so that we can create a cool melody. I'm gonna go with really simple scale, so it's gonna be the classic half step like you would normally hear in tech house and techno. And then as you start adding melodic notes or melodic variation to the bass line, then you will be able to fine tune the rhythm a little bit more. And that's the difference. So just by having the foundation, it's a lot easier. So now I can play a little bit more with the notes that we have. Maybe let's go and do like... And here we can do some little variations. And then maybe do a little bit more if we want. Maybe go like this, I think it's pretty cool. And then again, we are kind of repeating the same pattern here. Okay, so we got a pretty solid bass line, and it is now enough to start making the track, to start arranging it. And one more thing that I would usually do is I would just test it with different presets. Let's say we're gonna use the one that we used in the previous example, and it's gonna sound something like this, and I think it's pretty cool. Okay, foundation laid. Let's give your bass line more personality. Once you have your rhythm, start playing with note length. This will bring life to your bass line, add groove, and help you highlight the parts of the melody that really matter. Think of your bass line like writing a text to your friend. Here's a text. Try to read that out loud. No punctuation, no emotional pacing. Same with bass lines. If every note has the same length, it's flat, monotonous, and dead. Let's have a look at two examples. So one is the bass line where all the notes are literally the same length, and it's gonna sound very boring. So check it out, and then we're gonna fine tune it and test with different note lengths. Okay, sure, it doesn't sound really that bad, but just by changing the note length of some notes, and you can see it's not even that much, not a big change, but you can see visually, so this is the previous one, and this is another one, it sounds so much better, so much better. Check it out. Let's break down another example. It's the same melody, but all I did, I just changed the note length, and see how much it will affect your bass line and how much it will change the vibe. So from here, you just want to pick, okay, what vibe do I want for my bass line? So that's the first variation, and now we have the second one, so just compare visually what is happening. So this one and this one. This one uses a bit more short and punchy notes. Okay, we got the shape and the rhythm for the bass line. Now let's make it feel more human. Now that your bass line's rhythm is solid, let's make it feel good, humanize it. That means slightly adjusting note length and velocity to make it groove better and sound pleasant to our ears. When a human plays bass, every note has tiny differences in timing, force, and feel. Now imagine a robot doing it. Same pressure, same timing, every single note. Most producers do this without thinking. Just click notes into the grid and leave it. Okay, let me show you a few examples of groove and swing so that your bass lines don't sound flat, lifeless, and robotic. So here we have a bass line with no groove, no velocity, and this is how it sounds. Check it out, and we're gonna start improving. Okay, it's not bad, but let me show you an example of how much groove can improve your bass line. So we are applying groove here, and in Ableton, you can just go to the groove pool and select the one that you like the most. I like using MPC. I don't know, they just sound good to my ear. And then you just apply it here and you play with quantized timing, you play with the amount, and this is what I got. So I used a little bit of velocity here. I'll explain what it does just in a second, but check out and compare this to the previous one. And now the original one. So now you can hear how much more movement the second bass line has because we applied that groove and swing. One more cool thing that you can do to your bass lines, and this is a really easy way to add some extra movement. You can see I can drag my velocity to the cutoff filter and apply the desired amount. So what this thing does, if you look at these notes, you can see I can accentuate them a little bit, and by doing it, you can then create more movement and more dynamics in your bass line and combine that with groove, and wow, like your bass line now sounds nice and professional. Now that your bass line has a groove, let's decide what vibe it will have. Driving bass lines focus on the rhythm, locking in with the drums to create energy and stability. Melodic bass lines, on the other hand, use more note variation and movement. They are emotional, expressive, and sometimes a little dramatic. Driving bass lines are like typing. They are tight, stable, and create a solid foundation for your track. Melodic ones, they write, flowing curves, bold strokes, maybe a little messy, but packed with feeling. If your bass line looks like Helvetica, it's driving. If it looks like your ex's handwriting, yeah, definitely melodic. Okay, let's talk about the next interesting concept, melodic versus driving bass line. So as I mentioned earlier, it will dictate the stability of your track. So let's start with the full driving bass line. It will play just the root note of the track, and let's see how it sounds and compare that to the next ones. Very straightforward, very stable, and as we go right, we will add a bit more melodic variation to it, and you will really feel the difference between those two types of bass lines. So let's do still driving, but a little bit more melody. You can see we added a little bit, but most of the notes are still landing on the root note. One more time, the driving one. So you can see those little variations, especially the little pause here, it adds a little bit of, we could say, a pattern interrupt in rhythm, in variation, and because of that, the bass line sounds a little bit more diverse, I would say. So let's go to the next variation. It's even more melodic, and now we can really feel the difference between these two types. Compare that to the driving one. And now melodic one. So this one is a little bit more vibey, it's a little bit more playful, and a lot of the notes you can see here, we are not landing on the root note, and it gives a lot of variation. And the last one, it is full melodic. I try to add even more melodic variation to it. You can see almost every single note is a different note. So this is root note, but most of the notes are actually not landing on the root note. So I would say it's like probably 60%, or like something like that, right? Play this bass line and let's see how it feels. Now compare that to the driving one. This bass line is very vibey, it is very expressive, it jumps from one note to another, creating a lot of like this kind of movement, right? So as with the all previous steps, you just want to be conscious, okay, so what bass line am I making? All right, pick your weapon, and now let's aim at the right notes for your bass line. Use chord notes, root, third, fifth, and seventh in your bass lines. These notes always sound solid no matter what scale you are in. Writing bass lines without understanding harmony is like cooking without a recipe, just tossing in whatever is in the fridge and praying it's edible. Sure, once in a while you might get lucky, but most of the time it's a weird flavor mess. Now, start with the chord notes or a specific scale. That's following a recipe. You know the ingredients that work together. You're not guessing, you're crafting a sound that tastes right every time. Let's talk about harmonic notes and scales for your bass line. So if you are pretty new to music theory and you don't understand it really well, I'm now going to give you some tips so you can write amazing bass lines even if you don't know a lot about music theory. You can keep it pretty simple for your bass line. So by using harmonic notes or chord notes as well, you can create really amazing bass lines, and all we have to do is we have to count 3. So this is the third. We have to count 5, and we have to count 7. So F, 1, 2, 3, the third is going to be A, and it doesn't matter what key you are in, it will be always the same intervals. So this is how it sounds. This is F. Sounds pretty cool, right? Now we can count 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is going to be B. So those are pretty stable notes as well. You can see they just sound good. And now we're going to count 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So from F sharp, the 7 will be C sharp. So You can see very stable. And one more note here is going to be octave. This is the exact same note, but one octave higher. This is the most stable note interval, and it sounds like this. Very stable, very pleasant for our ears. And to show you the same example, let's say we're going to move this to A, and now all the same intervals apply. Just listen to the notes and the stability. Pretty cool. And now let me play you this bass line, and all I'm doing here, I'm not even using any scales like minor or major, I'm just using the harmonic notes, and let's see how that sounds. And it actually sounds pretty pleasant for the ears. Here's a pro tip for your bass lines if you want to make the melody writing process 10 times easier. So there's one scale that I use literally in every single track. It's called the Phrygian scale. And this scale is often used in heavy metal, in a lot of tech house, techno, like I mentioned, and it has a little bit of that Oriental Eastern vibe. It's dark and it's very cool for this style of music. So let me show you a few examples here and show you a few variations to the scale as well. Those are really subtle, but it can make a pretty huge difference on your track. So this is the melody that I wrote for this bass, and listen to the vibe of the melody here. So these three notes, they create this Eastern kind of vibe, and there are two variations to the scale. So there's one which is called Phrygian dominant, which is basically the Eastern one, and you can see this is the one that I'm using. And there is also one which is called just Phrygian. So let me put these notes, something like this. This is very Eastern, but if we pick just the Phrygian scale, you can see there's a difference in one note here, and it's going to create a slightly different vibe if you want to go with a little bit more like classic minor, if I can call it this way. I kind of like this. I don't use the Eastern all the time. I actually prefer the original Phrygian one, but sometimes the Eastern vibe is so cool. And if you use this scale for your bass lines, it will just sound good, because this is a really cool scale, and I saw a lot of producers, a lot of tips and tricks for this specific scale. So make sure you use it, because it is literally a cheat code to better bass lines. Okay, bass lines are locked. It's time to add some motion and magic. Flat bass lines are fine if your goal is to create elevator music. If you want some actual movement, make sure you use pitch bends and glides. They create energy, tension, and expression, like your bass line is speaking instead of mumbling. Pitch bends are motion. They're like that roller coaster climb. Click, 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 and then whoosh. If your bass is all static notes, you are standing in the line at the amusement park, but never getting on the ride. Let's now talk about pitch bends and glides, and this is my all-time favorite bass sound design, bass melody writing technique, and I have prepared 3 examples for this technique. Let's start with the glides first. This is the bass and drums, and pay attention to how it sounds and how I'm utilizing the glides here, and then we will break down the melody and a little bit of sound design as well. Check it out. I I love those glides, and those are really, really simple to do. So all we have to do is obviously make the notes overlap a little bit. And the secret to this bass line is the octave jumps like this. So I'm not just doing the regular glides, right? I'm using the same notes, but I can put it -1 octave, +1 octave, and because of that, it creates like, wow, this really, really intense glide, which sounds really, really amazing, right? And then we are combining this glide with the filter cutoff automation, like, wow, wow, wow. This is a little bit like psychedelic sound. And after doing that, you create a very nice, almost like organic bass line. So the filter automation helps us to emphasize the glides in the bass line. Now check out the same melody but without the filter automation. It sounds a little bit too static, a little bit too boring. This one sounds still pretty cool, but we can make it sound better. Not bad, right? So depending on the synth that you're going to be using, for this one, I'm using Diva. So the glide is here in the tuning option, and it's pretty intense, right? So you can play with the timing of your glides. So let me transition to the next bass line, and I'm going to show you the same example in Serum. So this one is very similar to the previous one, but the melody is a little bit different. I'm using a bit more simple melody as well. So you can see all I'm using here is just F, and I'm just jumping octaves here a little bit like this. So pay attention to the filter automation like we have here, and also the pitch bend. So the pitch bend is going to be here, and it's going to create a really nice transition effect. So check it out, and this is what we have. Same thing without the pitch bend. Okay, this is not bad, but when I do like this, maybe move it a little bit like this. Really cool, right? So the pitch bend is creating that, wow, this super cool effect, changing dynamics, changing energy. So let me walk you through super quickly how to do this in Serum. So obviously we have to use portamento, which is going to be the glide, right? So I like putting it around like 120, 150, so I get a lot of that glide, but it's not too slow. For the pitch bend, I'm using the modulation, like the pitch bend wheel, and make sure you put this to 12 and -12. So it gives you a lot of bandwidth, right? So you can go like a -1 octave and +1 octave, creating a lot of dynamics and variation in your bass line. And then we're just gonna automate this. So pitch bend, you can see here, show automation, and then just depending on where you want to automate, you can play with this parameter. And the same thing with the filter frequency, right? So just by opening, if I delete this on both of them, see how boring the bass line sounds. So a lot of dynamics and a lot of energy change. So this is pretty cool. And one last example, just to drive this point home, because if I was to show the only technique in this video, it will probably be this one. So I want to spend a lot of time showing you this, because this is really the next level bass technique. Okay, so same example here, filter frequency and the pitch bend. So pay attention to how it sounds. Check it out. Wow, so this one creates a lot of tension. If we go like this. So cool, I love this. Really simple to use, and once you learn it, your bass lines will literally sound like next level, really futuristic, because this is a really like futuristic sound. No bends? Congrats, you just ghosted the rave before the drop. Hope your Uber drive home was emotional. Okay, we got some motion in the bass line, but let's go even higher. Octave jumps are one of the fastest ways to add drama and movement. Same note, new attitude. Octave jumps are like grabbing a mushroom in Mario. Same note, but different universe. You don't need a new sound, just launch that sucker an octave up and boom, super bass mode. Alright, let's talk about the octave jumps. This is such a simple technique, but it can really give your bass lines a lot of variation, a lot of change in the energy. So octave jumps, it doesn't have to be the root note. You can see here I am jumping almost an octave. So E, C, E, B, this is the fifth. This is, I think, not sure what this interval is, doesn't matter, right? So I could have gone like down, but I'm choosing to go up. But the real octave jump, let's say it's gonna be E, right? This bass line, you can see it is exactly same pattern, but the only difference between the A section and the B section is the octave jump. So just by utilizing the octave jump, we can do a little bit more variation to the bass line. So check it out here. And if I go down, it's going to be a little bit too boring and a little bit too repetitive. We do not want that. So just by changing one note, you're literally making the bass line twice as long and adding that little punch at the end. So make sure to try it out. Here we have another variation. So this one is a little bit more complicated, but check it out. And if I take this out, or if I move it -1 octave, it's not going to be as interesting. It just sounds basic, right? So if I put it back, very cool. And then I can go back and show you a few more examples of this technique in action. So for example, the melodic variation here, check it out. So F and +1 octave, check it out one more time. It creates like pow, pow. Really cool dynamics. One more example is gonna be here. So you should get the point, right? So F sharp, now +1 octave, +1 octave. This one is +2 octaves, not something standard. I rarely do that, but in this bass line, it sounds pretty cool. And if I put this, let's say like this, even like this, octave jumps sound really, really cool. So make sure you use that for your bass line. Super simple, but super effective. Bass line's upgraded, but let's do one final touch before we bring it all together. Loops are like conversations. If you never switch it up, people stop listening. Make sure you add a little twist every 4 to 8 bars. Nothing crazy, but just enough to keep the listener hooked throughout the whole track. Fills are like changing camera angles in the movie. Same story, different shot. It keeps things fresh, adds tension, and stops your track from getting stale and boring. Here is how you can do fills and variations. So we have the main loop, which is 4 bars, and every 4 bars I'm adding a little variation at the end of the loop. So this is A, we could say A, B, A, C. So same thing, A, B, A, C. So the last one will have a slight change in the notes. And you can do it in a few different ways. You can either just keep it simple. So it's going to be the main bass line, and it's going to sound something like this. It sounds pretty cool if you just open the filter, and sometimes simplicity is what you need. You do not need to layer or add new sounds, just utilize what you have, right? But sometimes it is actually pretty cool to add some fills and add some synths. So it's gonna sound something like this. Just a different layer, but it sounds really good with a bass line. Another example, a different layer. So this one works really well in transition. So like every 8 bars, or where you have a little bit more space, maybe you do like a drum fill and you cut out the drums, you cut out the kick. And yeah, in these cases, it's cool to use some layering. But oftentimes it's just cool to use a filter and something like this. So let me play you in context how this can sound, for example, with an arpeggio, with the lead sound. Pretty cool, right? And now let's go back and use the original one, no layering, also pretty cool. And most of the times I actually prefer simplicity, which is kind of funny. Play everything together. And once you add maybe a little bit of reverb, a little bit of delay to these bass fills, that's really all you need to do. I want to show you one more example of how you can create fills and variations for your bass line so you have more creative ideas, because this approach is a little bit different to the previous one. So we have the main bass line, but in this example, I'm using 4 layers, but not all of them are landing on the same notes as the original bass line. So this one goes on the downbeat. Here we have, you can see a different note and different rhythm. So this one is sustained, and here this bass line, the fill is landing in between, so in the gaps here between the original notes. And let me play this for you, and you're gonna see how it sounds, and it's actually very interesting. So there's so many things that you can do to create cool fills and variations. Check it out. And as you can see, you don't necessarily need to add fills exactly at the end of 4 bars or at the end of 8 bars. This is kind of standard thing, it works. But for example, this one is somewhere in between, so it works as a bass lead and as a bass fill. So yeah, you can be very, very creative with that. Just make sure you are adding variations to your bass lines, because it's going to take it to the next level. All right, you got the groove, bounce, and energy in your bass line, but how do you turn it into a full track that makes people move? Easy, I'll show you in the next video here. It's called the Mona Lisa technique. No, seriously, it's a music theory disguised as art. So click here and let's finish that track.